Hello and welcome to my second segment on the NCC, National Council of Churches. I'd like to start this morning with a scripture from the book of Galatians, chapter 2, verse 4. And that because of false brethren unawares brought in, who came in privily to spy out our liberty which we have in Christ Jesus, that they might bring us into bondage. I hope that you watched the first segment of NCC. I'm looking to show how the socialist movement worldwide is looking to bring about one world religion. I started last time by showing you the crest you see in the bottom right of the screen there of the Fabian Society with the red flag and the wolf in sheep's clothing. And I would like to read this. It's evidently from the unityprocess.com. The Fabian Society and Gradualism. The Fabian Society is a socialist society founded in 1884 in London, having as its goal the establishment of a democratic socialist state in Great Britain and an international socialist world government. A couple of the founding people of that Fabian Society were the Webbs, Sidney and Beatrice Webb. And I find it curious that Miss Webb, her maiden name is Potter, so one of the founding few folks of the Fabian Society, her name was Beatrice Potter. Just found that interesting. The Fabians put their faith in evolutionary socialism rather than revolution, thus gradualism. The name of the society is derived from the Roman general Fabius Cunctator, I suppose is how you say it, Cunctator, whose patient and elusive tactics in avoiding pitched battles secured his ultimate victory over stronger forces. And that's sourced obviously from Britannica. The Fabian Society's tortoise logo highlights their gradualist approach with the caption, "When I strike hard." You might also find it curious that one BHO number 44 is a member of this organization. Additionally, their coat of arms is a wolf in sheep's clothing, insinuating that their gradual changes are deceptive and predatory in nature, which by and large they are. Here's a definition of gradualism, a policy of gradual reform rather than sudden change or revolution. And in politics, gradualism is the hypothesis that social change can be achieved in small, discrete increments rather than in abrupt strokes such as an uprising. Gradualism is one of the defining features of political left-leaning liberalism and reformism. In socialist politics and within the socialist movement, the concept of gradualism is frequently distinguished from reformism. So you get an idea of a little more of what the Fabian Society is about, and that's one reason that I bring them up each time. I have another graphic I'd like to present to you. I may be able to find a different one. This is probably a familiar. You see the tree, and in the bottom of the tree, eugenics is the self-direction of human evolution. Like a tree, eugenics draws its materials from many sources and organizes them into a harmonious entity. And here across the bottom, it has genealogy, sociology and religion, psychiatry, surgery, medicine, politics. There's a lot of different things that fall on the roots. Let's see if there's another. That's about the same. That's a little bit better where you can kind of see there's anthropology, mental testing, anthropometry, physiology. So they're looking to affect all of these elements of science. and they label it under eugenics, which from my understanding has a lot to do with the control of the population. And again, that would be the direction of human evolution. Last time, in addition to having touched on the Fabian Society, I went into several articles that I'd located regarding the National Council on Churches. The Christian Observer article I'd like to go back into, so I will see if I can find that right here and pull that up. And you may recall I complimented the photograph of the gentleman, and I did make a mistake that I noticed last time. Karl Marx was born 1818 on May 5th. May 5th is not May Day, but it is Cinco de Mayo, but nonetheless. And I had given you the quote, and I'll quote this again. The beginning of true liberty is Jesus Christ, and therefore the first and last target of all subversion is biblical faith. Hence it is that the church has been the first target of infiltration and subversion and is the most subverted institution in the United States today. Dr. R.J. Rushdoony. And I feel like that ties into my scripture passage, Galatians chapter 2, verse 4. Now, I went through this part of the article with you last time, and I'll reiterate here in the second paragraph. You see that it says, claiming to speak with authority for some 42 million American Christians, and this was updated in October of 2018, the National Council of Churches, the NCC, and their website address is ncccusa.org. Again, that's three C's, ncccusa.org. So if you wanted to check out their website, that's a good way to put eyes on or even print out the list of the member communions, and I'll show that here in a little while. But there's different figures that range from representing hundreds of thousands of congregations in the United States, and who knows how many worldwide. It says here it includes 33 denominations, but I believe there's 38 on the list at this time. Okay, so we'll move on into the article. Don't want to bore you with reading, but we touched on in 1968, 50 years ago, that they expended $19 million on worldwide leftist projects. And again, they collected about upwards of $25 million in 1968. So what kind of dollars are they seeing 50 years later? Let's see, and I mentioned that in their General Assembly meeting in San Diego in 1968 that they had a presentation that was entitled NCC Ministries and the Communist World. And let's go on into the article. Although the aid was received in the name of the Polish Ecumenical Council, it was administered by the communists for their own purposes. From 52 to 67, over $40 million worth of food, clothing, and other material was given by the NCC Church World Service. That's one of their many organizational arms, was given to the communist government of Yugoslavia. And even stranger was an admission by the NCC report that they were operating a refugee program which picked up the tab for relocating Brazilian communists in Mexico. So just to give you an idea of what they were up to 50 years ago. Let's see, in the next paragraph I've highlighted a few things. This is in regards to Peking government to the United States. This is press for the admission of the Peking government to the United Nations, create conditions for cooperation between the United States and the communist countries of Eastern Europe. And we know that in the 60s that we were still right in the middle of the Cold War. And next paragraph, you see the mention of the Church Women United. And let's see, the NCC has somehow continued to maintain not only its reputation for legitimacy, but its tax-exempt status as well. And it is very well shielded indeed and rooted in a conspiracy against Christianity in America, which goes back more than 80 years. And again, I'm reading from an article that was in the Christian Observer. All right. And the NCC has consistently propagandized for every conceivable leftist program, from federally forced integration to complete disarmament of the United States. From its office in D.C., the NCC spokesmen regularly appear before committees of Congress to lobby for causes of the far left. Through the NCC, though the National Council has never registered under the Lobbying Act of 1946, and I'm not sure why that they are not required to do that. And despite its having been repeatedly exposed as a fraud, the NCC has somehow continued to maintain not only its reputation for legitimacy, but its tax-exempt status as well. A full decade before the turn of the century, which would have been, 1890, I suppose that they're referring to, yes. A full decade before the turn of the century, the seeds of the Marxist social gospel were already being planted within our major seminaries and divinity schools by returning American theologians who had studied in England and Germany. There they had become infected with the virus of a conspiracy which had already changed much of the spiritual and moral structure of Europe. After a while, of course, America produced her own clerical conspirators. One of these was a man named Walter Rauschenbusch. And Walter Rauschenbusch, circa 1890, founded an organization called the Brotherhood of the Kingdom. And that's, the Brotherhood of the Kingdom was a spiritual ideal in the social order, and he was partnered with the likes of Leighton Williams. I do believe there were also gentlemen with the names of Channing and Bushnell that were involved, and they were proponents of Fabianism and Luminism. And you may recall in showing you the cover page in the book, A Christian Manifesto, that there was not only the Communist Manifesto that came out in 1848, but then in 1933 and 1973, an update of the Humanist Manifesto. And all of these really fall under the umbrella of the social gospel, the Marxist social gospel. Also, Europe, and I think that it could possibly be a result of the prevalency of Calvinism from the 1600s, 1700s, that contribute to the social gospel because of the tenets of Calvinism. I won't go into that any further. In 1885, Rauschenbusch was graduated from the prestigious Rochester Theological Seminary, thoroughly indoctrinated in the socialist tenets of Luminism, a philosophy calling itself a religion, but substituting faith in man for faith in God. As the atheist Karl Marx noted, Luminism is really nothing else but Marxism. And in the book, the A Christian Manifesto, which I'd shown you before, it equates humanism to Marxism. So Luminism, social gospel, Marxism, communism, it's many different names really for the same thing. Okay, so again, Luminism, a philosophy calling itself a religion but substituting faith in man for faith in God. As the atheist Karl Marx noted, Luminism is really nothing else but Marxism. Rauschenbusch was both a Luminist and a Marxist, same difference. Thus, in 1892, he and a group of comrades, interesting choice of words, communist comrades, organized the Brotherhood of the Kingdom to promote their radical beliefs along Fabian lines. Rauschenbusch declared if ever socialism is to succeed, it cannot succeed in an irreligious country. It must start in the churches. So we're looking at 125 years ago, approximately, throughout leading up to during the 1800s and in 1892. I mean, how much more plain can you make it? And start in the churches it did. And here's my note about Beatrice Webb, actually, right here. In New York, Reverend Huntington, another Marxist, was busy founding the American branch of the Christian Socialist movement. It was to be a religious arm of the infamous Fabian Socialist Society, which had been created some years earlier. Again, it was 1884, in London, at the direction of Sidney and Beatrice Webb. And again, Beatrice Webb, her maiden name is Potter. Her dad was well off. George Bernard Shaw is in there, a host of other prominent Marxists of the time. Indeed, the Webbs made a trip to the U.S. in 1898 to review the success of Fabian infiltration of religion. By the turn of the century, Marxist plans for the capture of our churches were proceeding apace. In February of 1900, the first effort to create a national federation of churches resulted in a nationwide committee of 25 leading churchmen, many of whom were devoted Fabians, and Walter Rauschenbusch and Harry Ward were involved in that. And I'd mentioned in the last video, that it was just prior to 1908 that James Armstrong, a Methodist bishop from New York, had established the Methodist Socialists. I named it in the last video. Let's see. It's the, we'll get to the name of it, Methodist Federation for Social Service. So that was in 1907. Let's just continue in the article and we'll locate that. February 1901, delegates from local church federations met at Philadelphia. Interesting, that's where the cracked Liberty Bell is, the home of pseudo-liberty, met at Philadelphia and formed the National Federation of Churches. Okay, that's prior to the 1908. Okay, we'll go on down here. In 1907, the far left created a supporting front called the Methodist Federation for Social Service. That's the James Armstrong organization. A religious organization found by the House Committee on Un-American Activities to have been a key apparatus of the communist conspiracy since its very inception. In fact, when it was finally exposed years later, it was cited as among the more conspicuous fronts for communist activity, and as you might expect, one of the founding Methodist ministers was Harry Ward, the brilliant protege of Rauschenbusch, and for the next 35 years, this communist front was directed by Ward and staffed by numerous functionaries of the Communist Party. By this time, the groundwork had been laid. Rauschenbusch paid a return visit to Sidney and Beatrice Webb in England and fully committed himself to the Fabian designs for subversion of the Christian church in America. And then in the following year, December of 1908, there was a 9-day conference in Philadelphia, and that's where the Federal Council of Churches of Christ in America was formed, and that's the precursor agency to today's National Council on Churches. I again mentioned it in the other video. This was formed in 1908, the FCC, interestingly enough, the Federal Council of Churches, and in 1950, it just a certain degree it had to do with sidestepping their reputation for their activities up to that point, and they made the change to National Council on Churches. So, FCC was officially formed by representatives of 29 Protestant and Eastern Orthodox denominations, and chose as its constitution the same plan of federation that had earlier been adopted by the socialists attending the 1905 Interchurch Conference on Federation. They adopted the social creed of the churches. There's the social gospel again. And Ward had earlier submitted his plan to Nikolai Lenin. So by 1914, the Federal Council of Churches had become one of the major outlets in America for Marxist propaganda. And let's see, this newly formed organization, was the brainchild of top conspirator Andrew Carnegie, who used it to capture for the insiders the controlling clique of the Federal Council by subsidizing the Church Peace Union to the tune of $2 million. That's right here. And after the meeting with Carnegie, this is an interesting thing. Shortly after the meeting with Carnegie, 2 international church conferences were promoted by the FCC's Church Peace Union, one for Roman Catholics held in Belgium and the other for Protestants in Germany, and both were scheduled to convene on August 1st, 1914, which by an odd coincidence, I don't believe in coincidence and I hope that you don't either, was the very day that war was declared between Germany and Russia. And let's see, several months later at Cambridge, the Fabian Socialists set up an International Fellowship of Reconciliation. So the Fellowship of and the Council of and all of these different organizational names is just mind-boggling. You could go on and dozens and dozens of different names of these undermining organizations. So anyway, the Fabian Socialists set up an International Fellowship of Reconciliation to protest the war. So they protested the war, which I find that part interesting, but anyway, there's reference to the Bolsheviks and Nikolai Lenin and the government of Russia, and they established, therefore, a base for Marx's continuing world revolution. We'll skip down here to 1919. In early 1919, the Russian communists issued a call for the founding of the Communist International, resulting that September 1st in the formation of the American Communist Party from the left wing of the Socialist Party. Among the hundreds of delegates at the founding convention in Chicago, and we know Chicago's reputation today, were comrades John Krosher and Dennis Batt, representing the Michigan State Organization of the Socialist Party. And they did an all-out campaign against religion as its main and immediate objective. Years later, a charter member of the party revealed The policy in those days was framed in such a way that the members of the Communist Party could infiltrate church organizations for the purpose of conducting their propaganda among them, for enlisting their support for Soviet Russia, and for the various campaigns in which the communists were interested. So, I'm in my early 50s, and we grew up hearing about a Cold War, and then I guess maybe with the Reagan administration or thereabouts, a little after the Cold War sort of went away. Some say that the space shuttles were really spy craft. They could fly at incredible speeds high overhead and go and take reconnaissance and get out of their airspace before they had time to do anything about it. So instead of exceeding the limits of the firmament, which we know are not possible, likelihood the space shuttles were really just spy planes, high tech, high speed. In the early 20s, the Communist Party made considerable gains in its program to infiltrate the churches. Again, there's the mention of Ward, and there's Davis, Spofford, Williams, and as former top communist Benjamin Gitlow told the House Committee on Un-American Activities in 1953, now this is after they've already changed the National Council on Churches, this group wielded tremendous influence in the religious field and did Trojan horse work in advancing the communist conspiracy in religion. And I really had toyed with the idea of titling this series "Behold a Red Horse." There's the book out that's "Behold a Pale Horse," referring to Islam. And I just thought about the fact that they were working as a Trojan horse, and in Revelation there's the four horsemen of the apocalypse, one of which is a red horse, and many would say that red horse is is communism, because it's really Marxist communism has killed tens of millions of Christians through even just the last 150 years. Okay, a little bit more to cover in this article. The most important communist in the field of religion, said Gitlow. Let's see. Here we go. Was Robert W. Dunn, who served as the Communist Party's liaison between its political committee and secretariat and the clergymen operating under instructions of the party. Dunn, an official with the American Civil Liberties Union. How you like that? So Dunn was an official with the ACLU, carried his orders to Ward and others, who in turn issued directives to their other leaders of the FCC, and they were all members of the Communist Party. Williams even worked in the Soviet Union as an assistant in the commissariat, however you say this word, commissariat of Foreign Affairs. So in the early 50s, before most of us were even born, the millions of American Christians were under the thumb of communism, supporting communism through either the Federal Council on Churches or the National Council on Churches, depending on whether it was prior to 1950 or not. It blows my mind. In 1922, the American Communist Party and all the communist parties throughout the world adopted the United Front strategy ordered by Lenin and the Communist International. And this enabled the Reds greatly to expand their infiltration of religion. Gitlow testified the number of clergymen who followed the Communist Party line grew by leaps and bounds. Not very encouraging. And in 1924 and again in 29. And here's old Harry Ward. It might be better that he never was born, but traveled to Moscow to discuss with Stalin the use of the churches in furthering the goals of the international communist conspiracy. In early 25, Ward was sent to China. And here in the last couple of sentences, that was also the case in this country, where the Federal Council also already had a budget of $350,000 and an office in Washington from which it promoted communist interests. And they had the ear of people in government, even back then. And let's see, I wanted to point out something about John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller had, from 1926 to 29, contributed over $137,000 to FCC, a sum equal to about 10% of its total annual income. So you can see where their funding came from. You've got your Andrew Carnegie, and you've got your Rockefeller, and the Rothschilds are part of it. So these, maybe of the 13 satanic bloodlines, these people are funding these subversive organizations from, dating back into the 1800s. And here's a exposed and obscene FCC sexual manual entitled Young People's Relationships, described as a crowning achievement. So you can see that even in 1932, that they're trying to promote obscenities. And there is ties to the Union Theological Seminary in New York. An eager young Marxist who promptly began working for the ACLU. Ward's pupil was Arnold Johnson. Here's another name, public relation director for the Communist Party. So, if you really want to look into this article in its entirety, again, it's on the website christianobserver.net, I believe it is, and yes, and it's slash the dash national dash council, it's dashes between every word, the National Council of Churches, NCC Communist Agenda. And I still want to cover some more in this article, believe it or not. And here we go. Ultimately, a world government of delegated powers, complete abandonment of U.S. isolationism, and we'll talk about that more probably in a subsequent video because I'm over 30 minutes already. Strong, that's probably James Strong. Strong immediate limitations on national sovereignty, international control of all armies and navies, a system, universal system of money, worldwide freedom of immigration. So we're back in 1942, and they had their commission to study the basis of a just and durable peace. And beginning in the late 30s, and we're going to talk some more about this gentleman right here, John Foster Dulles. You'll know that name from the airport, Dulles Airport, I believe that's in Washington, D.C. He had an interesting career. As a matter of fact, I found a doctoral dissertation done by Dr. Albert Keim. I believe he was originally from Virginia, but he attended, I believe it was Ohio State, and I found a dissertation from the early 70s online, and I'm going to talk a little bit about John Foster Dulles and show what his roles kind of were. But anyway, worldwide freedom of immigration, so open borders, universal system of money, progressive elimination of all tariff and quota restrictions on world trade, a democratically controlled international bank. So the Commission for a Just and Durable Peace in 1942 at the FCC convention is already you know, looking to bring communism and have it involved here. And let's see, chairman of the commission which issued these proposals was John Foster Dulles, an insider who was a leader of the Federal Council of Churches. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up so that each segment isn't all that long. And again, if this topic is of interest to you, I would suggest that you visit this ChristianObserver.net. I also want to, before I take off, I want you to see the list. This is supposedly current. And this is a list of the member communions. And if you know people in these member communions of the National Council on Churches, I think that they should be privy to this. And here it says that it's 45 million people, over 100,000 congregations. It's 38 different denominations. African Methodist Episcopal, that you'll see that as an AME church. And then you also have the AME Zion Church, Alliance of Baptists, American Baptist Churches in the USA, Armenian Church of America, Eastern and Western Dioceses, Assyrian Church of the East, Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in the U.S. and Canada, Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, Church of the Brethren, Community of Christ, Coptic Orthodox Archdiocese of North America, Ecumenical Catholic Communion, the Episcopal Church, Evangelical Lutheran, Greek Orthodox, Hungarian Reformed, International Council of Community Churches, Korean Presbyterian, Malankara Orthodox Syrian Church, Mar Thoma Church, Moravian Church in America, National Baptist Convention of America, National Baptist Convention USA, National Missionary Baptist Convention of America. Now again, this isn't the Southern Baptists, but we know that maybe upwards of a couple of percentage of Southern Baptist ministers, not to speak of the congregations, but they're Freemasons. That's maybe not proven, but the numbers, I've found numbers that indicate that there is percentage points of ministers in the SBA that are part of the Freemasons. To continue, National Missionary Baptist Convention of America, Orthodox Church in America, Patriarchal Parishes of the Russian Orthodox, Polish National Catholic Church, Presbyterian Church USA, Progressive National Baptist Convention, Reformed Church America, Religious Society of Friends, Friends United Meeting. Oftentimes when you have that Friends in there, you're going to find that those are Quakers. Religious Society of Friends, Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, and yes, the Quakers go back to the Northeast. Serbian Orthodox Church in North and South America, the Swedenborgian Church of North America. There's a story in that all by itself. Syrian Orthodox Church of Antioch, Ukrainian Orthodox Church, United Church of Christ, that's a big one. And here's probably the what may be the largest among them. And again, the roots of the Federal Council of Churches are tied to Methodism with James Armstrong, the bishop from New York, and the United Methodist Church. And that's a very large organization. I know I was part of it. So again, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to hear this out. Sound the alarm. If you know people that are in these member communions, I think that if they're not aware of what their congregations and their national conferential offices are involved in, that they should know, and either they can ask why or decide to seek something else. I've known of all this, maybe not in such great detail, for about a year's length of time. And I've sat sat still, watching to see if anybody else is bringing this out, and I just don't see it. I've found very little, with the exception of these handful of articles, which are few and far between, as far as I've been able to find. There's not very much talk about this, and my concern in sitting tight was, one, to see if someone else would, with perhaps greater capacity in the video production world, would come out and talk about this. But I haven't seen anyone do it, and I've been watching for a long time. So I'm making the leap, and I hate to think of apostasy when mentally I drew a picture of these large churches all over the country and 3 people sitting in the pews on a Sunday. And that really didn't rest well with me. But the truth of the matter is that even if there are bodies in the seats, the churches are still apostate. And that's even worse. So spread the news. Remember that Jesus is the light of the world. He's the truth and the way and the life. No one comes to the Father except by the way of Jesus. God bless you.